Clear blue water, take me home. Bring back them good old days I used to know. Must have been something in the water in that old sawmill creek. Baptized in the holler, I got down on my knees.
Morning guys, Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School, back with another video in our series on modern trapping. We are going to discuss foothold type traps today. We've already discussed conibears. We've discussed a little bit about prepping your traps as far as dipping, waxing, dyeing, and things of that nature. We'll talk more about that as we go. This is going to be a very long series. Before we go into leg hold type traps or foothold type traps, I'd like to just have a quick discussion about something. I've got some pictures that I'm going to post at the end of this video from the Fur Takers of America Trappers College that I attended with one of my instructors last week. We caught lots of animals. A lot of people believe that trapping is inhumane, and my statement to that would be trapping is not inhumane. Some trappers are inhumane. If you use the correct trap at the correct application for the correct target animal, most of the time traps are very humane. Even traps like these foothold type traps are only designed to hold the animal. Now, of course, once in a while you're going to have one that gets wrung off. In other words, he breaks his leg off. He doesn't chew his foot off necessarily. What happens is he gets pinched in between these jaws, and if he loses circulation or it becomes numb, he doesn't realize it's there anymore. They don't have the intelligence to understand that, and when they're trying to gnaw and bite at the trap, they bite on their foot. So if you hear about something chewing its own leg off to get out of a trap, that's probably not true. He probably just either wrung his foot off because he was a very small animal in a large trap. In other words, you caught a non-target animal. We'll talk about that when we talk about adjusting our traps here in a few minutes, because that's going to be the main discussion today. Or you left the animal in the trap too long, or sometimes just something happens. An accident can happen where an animal can break his leg, or something else can happen where he opens up his skin. But for the most part, these traps are very humane. I'm going to put my hand in a couple of these traps to show you that they really don't hurt. They're made for catching. The mechanics of the trap do not make the jaws shut with force. They are designed to close the jaws around an object, not snap them shut. And I'll show you that as we go. So we're going to talk about three different types of foothold traps today. We're going to talk about a single long spring, a double long spring, and we're going to talk about a double coil spring or a coil spring type foothold trap. And these three that we're going to talk about are very small. They're my favorites. They're very good for a self-reliance type application. You can catch most any animal in these depending on pan tension and your set, up to and including a coyote. Now, they will definitely hold a fox. A coyote may be able to pull out. A large coon may be able to pull himself out. There are some advantages of long springs over coil springs, although the big advantage to a coil spring is overall size. The weight is about the same, but it doesn't take up as much room. And we'll talk about that as we talk about these one by one, but I want to first talk about how to set your trap up and how to adjust your trap. So stay with me, guys. Okay, guys, so as we get started here, and excuse me if you are an experienced trapper, but I make these videos for everyone to learn from, and there's a lot of guys out there that have never trapped before. So the first thing I want to do is I want to kind of discuss trap components, and it's very simple. This is a #1 long spring trap, very typical of what you might see hanging in your granddad's garage, or hanging on an old shed somewhere, or hanging in an antique store. This one happens to be a Blake & Lamb. It is called a single spring foothold trap. The components of this trap are very simple. You have a pan that moves up and down, and this basically fires your trigger to close the jaws. You have a dog, which is a lever that catches in a notch on the pan, so that when the pan is pushed down, it releases that trigger, and this jaw goes, or it releases that trigger, and the jaw goes underneath the trigger. You have the jaws of the trap, which are right here, and you have the spring. And this is the spring, and then you have a frame, and this is all part of the frame. So you've got this back end of the frame that holds the trigger. The pan is attached to the frame. The jaws are attached to the frame, and then the spring goes, pushes down on the frame and up onto the jaws. And the way this trap works is you would break this trap down, and I'm going to do it over on this side. Break this spring down, and push this trap open. Then you would flip the dog over the top, and your pan would sit on top of that dog, just like this. You've got to let a little pressure on there. I'm really not doing this the proper way because I want you guys to get a good view of what this looks like. And that's the way that trap is set. And just to show you that these are a very humane trap, I'm going to actually put my hand in this one. You have to fold this spring forward toward the dog to get that back jaw to lay down. And there, I just put my hand in that trap. Now it stung a little bit, but it didn't hurt me by any means. It's meant to close the jaws. That spring lifts up and closes the jaws. It doesn't snap them shut on you to break anything. It just closes the jaws around whatever's inside of it. Now they do make what's called an offset jaw, which has a space in between the jaws where there's a cutout intentionally to make it not so tight on an animal's foot. There are also padded jaw traps that have padding on these jaws that close around the animal's foot. I spoke very extensively to Pete Askins at the Trappers College, who was the lead design engineer for Woodstream, who owned Victor Oneida. And he told me that even through thorough necropsy of animals that had been trapped and killed, that the offset jaw traps and the padded jaw traps really didn't do any more damage to the animal physically than the normal foothold trap did. So as you can see, I closed it right on my hand. It didn't leave a single mark, didn't hurt me, didn't bruise me, just pinched a little bit. As soon as I pushed the pressure down, I was able to pull out. That's the advantage of this over a coil spring type trap, is the animal really cannot pull against this and push down and get this trap open. They can do that sometimes on a coil spring type trap, but it's still not very easy, and we'll talk about that as we go. The back components of this trap is basically just a chain. You can see that this chain has several swivel points, and that's important. If you're trying to respect the animal and you don't want him to get twisted and tangled up or be in any more pain than he needs to be in, then you need swivel points on this trap to keep this chain from getting tangled up. There's a swivel point at the trap. There's a line swivel in the center of this trap. And there's also a swivel at the double stake end of this trap that's double swiveled on both sides. So there's a lot of swiveling points on this trap where it can be moved around and manipulated, and it's not going to tangle the chain up or entangle anything else. You have a double situation on the back of this thing, so this trap can be double staked into the ground. And believe me, animals can pull out stakes like you would not believe. If you single stake this trap in fairly soft ground, even with a 2-foot stake, a coyote's going to yank that thing right out of the ground. He's going to stand up on his back legs and pump that trap up and down until that stake starts to pull out of the ground. I saw single stakes that were bent over, actually, still in the ground but bent by large raccoons this weekend, or this last week. So you need to double stake your traps whenever you're able to, or use some type of earth anchor, and we'll talk about those things as we get into trap sets. So that is a single spring, #1 long spring trap. Okay, now let's talk about the double spring. Now this double spring is a number 11 long spring, and the reason it's called a number 11 is because basically it has two. It's a double #1. It's a #1 long spring trap with 2 springs, so it's called a 1-1 number 11. This is a Sleepy Creek. They're made in the USA. Very, very good traps. It has all of the same components that the other trap had, except that it has 2 springs on the jaws instead of 1, which now enables it to, even though it's small, hold larger animals. This would probably hold a coyote fairly easily. I caught several animals in this trap last week. In this particular trap, I caught a groundhog and I caught a possum in this particular trap. So it's very capable of catching multiple types of animals. It has a ring on it that has a drowning lock on it, which I'll talk to you about later as well when we talk about sets, and it has several swivel points. With these, the easiest thing that you can do with these really is just break them over your leg to set them. Put the dog to the front, break it down over your leg like this, push that operating jaw, or that strong jaw, what they call the strong jaw, which is the jaw that is on the dog side. That's called the strong jaw. Push the strong jaw over and hold it with your hand. As long as you're holding it underneath the frame and here, that trap's not going to go off on you. At that point, you can flip that dog over the top, lift your pan from the back side so your hand's not inside the trap. You lift the pan up from the back side, and you see how easy that went off, and my hands were nowhere near the trap. So we'll break that down again, just like we did the first time. We'll get our we got to get below. You want to get your dog up out of the way before you do this. And as long as I'm holding the frame and I've got my hand underneath the trap, it cannot go off on my hand. You've got to release a little bit of pressure to get that pan tension before you let go of the trap. And again, when you set this trap, these springs would be moved forward so that you can relax the weak jaw. Okay, and that's how you would set a number 11 double long spring. The more pan tension you have, the bigger animal it's going to take to trip that trap. So if I were targeting fox and coyote or large coon, I would increase my pan tension. I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. And that would not allow things like rabbits, small groundhogs, small possums, and things like that to trip my trap. Okay, so while we're talking about this number 11 long spring, let's talk about how to adjust our pan tension. And there's two different things that you have to realize. There's pan travel and there's pan tension. Pan travel basically is how far that pan travels from a level position down before it releases the dog. Okay, and that can be adjusted very easily by taking a pair of pliers and bending this frame up or back, and that will increase the length essentially of this dog by moving it forward or backward and how deep it goes into the pan itself. And that will make it have to travel further. Now you have to be careful that the pan doesn't travel all the way to the bottom and still not release. And you can see this one's just about right. The way I've got this set up is when the pan is down, there's a little bit of clearance. And there's also a window cut out in this pan, which is something I really like about these Sleepy Creeks, because you can set that thing up and you can see that window when you're setting that pan. Okay? The other thing that we have to talk about is pan tension. Pan tension is how much pressure it takes to push that pan down to begin with. Now obviously your spring and your jaws and things are going to add pressure to that, so you can't test that pressure unless the trap is set. But you generally want 3 to 4 pounds of pressure, and there's devices you can buy to test that with for larger animals like fox and coyote. If you're targeting small game animals, and I'll show you pictures of rabbits caught in foothold type traps, then you need a very light amount of pan tension. And there's usually, on a lot of traps, not all but most, have a screw that goes through the pan right here on a bolt that actually connects that pan to the frame. And you can take any screwdriver like the one on a multi-tool or a pocket knife, or you can take just a regular screwdriver. Most of the trappers at the college carry a screwdriver with them and a specific tool nut driver that will fit this nut, and you can tighten that up to increase how hard it is to push that pan down. You can see now that pan's not floppy, it's stiff. If I loosen that up a little bit, now it flops. Okay, that's pan tension. That's how you target species. Now, if you have very little pan tension and you're targeting smaller game, that's not going to stop you from catching the bigger stuff. You're still going to catch the fox and the coyote, the large coon and things like that to get in your trap. But in a self-reliance situation where you're just looking for food, I try to go with light pan tension because that's what I want to catch smaller animals. So when you set this trap, you've got your pan tension set where you want it. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure that when that trap is set and ready to be used, let's see if I can get you a good close-up of this. When that trap is set and ready to be used, that your pan is fairly level. You want your pan to be setting level with the trap. You don't want it up, you don't want it down. You want just the right amount of travel so that when that animal touches it, it goes off. Now, again, by pushing this forward or pulling this back, it increases the depth that this trigger is underneath that pan, or what this dog is underneath that pan. So this is called the dog or the trigger, and it goes underneath your pan. Now, if you're going to test this trap for pan travel or pan tension, if you push the weak jaw up and hold on to the frame of the trap, not the spring, hold on to the frame of the trap, you can actually trip this trap in your hand just like this, and it's not going to catch you. That's the way you test it. You can also level up your pan that way and keep your hands out of the way of getting caught in the trap. Okay. So the last trap that I want to talk about today is called the coil spring trap. And these traps are generally swiveled from the bottom of the trap. They have swivel points within the chain, at the end of the chain, and most of the time at the bottom of the trap, just like the other traps do, to keep them from binding up. The way this trap works is exactly the same way, except the springs, instead of being out here and being double long springs, there are two upright springs that are connected here that spring forward. And again, all it does is close the trap. If you look at the way this trap operates, these come up and close the trap. There's nothing pushing against these jaws really to snap them shut. All that's happening is this is riding up along those two jaws and closing them. So to set this trap, you're going to push down on both sides, just like this. Again, just worry about the strong jaw. Don't worry about the weak jaw. You're going to get that underneath and lift your pan up. And again, if you hold this by the frame, like this, you're not going to get hung in this trap. Go underneath your weak jaw to set your pan. Give yourself a little pan tension and let go. And again, as long as you're holding this trap underneath that weak jaw, then you can look at that trap and you can level that pan up. Trappers owe it to the animals and owe it to the public to be well educated on what type of traps to use for what type of animals. This is a very good trap to use in a self-reliance type situation because it's small. You can see it's not very big. It doesn't weigh very much. It takes a little bit of chain, but you could shorten that up if you wanted to and just stake it directly under the trap with just a few inches of chain if you wanted to, and put that clear up here on this swivel point, and you only have 8 or 10 inches of chain underneath that trap instead of the 1.5 feet that I've got. And that would take up less room in your pack. We'll talk about other traps as we go in this series, like snares. We've already talked a little bit about conibears. I've done a video on the versatility of the conibear, but there are quite a few other tricks I want to show you with conibears, as well as different types of sets, both in the water, along the water's edge, and out of the water on land with these traps as well. Okay guys, well I hope that answered some or most of the questions that you might have as a beginner about the different types of foothold traps that can be used for trapping both land and water animals. And we can discuss this a little further as we go while we're making sets, while I'm showing you what tools to carry and how to use these traps effectively to catch animals. Like I said, I will put a slideshow at the end of this video of animals that I personally caught in foothold traps at the Fur Takers of America Trappers College last week. I caught several animals in them. They are very, very effective traps, very good for a self-reliant situation. Would I carry these in a short-term survival situation? Absolutely not. I'd probably carry snares. But if I were talking about long-term self-reliance and food gathering, it's hard to beat these foothold traps. I appreciate you guys joining me for this video. I thank you for your support. I thank you for the reviews. I thank you for everything that you do for me, for my family, and for my school and my business. I'm Dave Canterbury. I'll be back with another video in this series as soon as I can.